Don't swallow." That was the only thing I could think to say. 3 seconds. That was all it took for the colorless, odorless liquid to vanish into the vintage 1982 Bordeaux, sitting on the table of the most powerful man in New York. The restaurant was buzzing with the laughter of the elite, the Clinford of crystal, and the scent of white truffles. But all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart and the Russian whisper I wasn't supposed to understand. "The wolf dies tonight." I was just a waitress. I was supposed to be invisible. But in the next 5 minutes, I would shatter a billion-dollar assassination plot, lose my job, and become the #1 target of the Bratva. This isn't a movie. This is how I survived Tuesday night. Sutton adjusted the collar of her starch-stiff uniform, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed the fabric. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of culinary excellence, perched on the 60th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, overloofed Central Park like a jeweled eye. To work here, you didn't just need to know how to carry a tray. You needed to know how to disappear. Table 4 needs water. Table 7 wants the sommelier. And Sutton? The floor manager, a man named Gustav, who possessed the warmth of a glacier, snapped his fingers in front of her face. "Fix your posture. Mr. Ford is arriving in 5 minutes. If you drop so much as a napkin, you're fired before it hits the floor." "Yes, sir," Sutton murmured, keeping her eyes down. She was 22, barely scraping by on tips and tuition fees for her linguistics degree at Columbia. She was a ghost in this world of old money and hedge fund titans. That was the job description. Be present, but absent. Be helpful, but non-existent. The elevator doors chimed, a soft, golden sound that silenced the foyer. Angelo Ford walked in. He didn't walk so much as he occupied space. At 34, Angelo was the CEO of Ford Interglobal, a defense contracting firm that dealt in secrets as much as software. He was tall, his shoulders broad, under a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Sutton's entire education. He had a face that graced the cover of Forbes and Time regularly, sharp jaw, tired grey eyes, and an air of permanent, exhausted vigilance. He was alone. He was always alone. "Mr. Ford," Gustav practically purred, bowing low. "Your usual table by the window is ready." Angelo nodded, bypassing the pleasantries. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He sat, placed his phone face down on the tablecloth, and stared out at the city lights. Sutton was assigned to his section, along with a table of 4 men sitting directly behind him. The 4 men were loud, jovial, and Drinford vodka by the bottle. They wore suits that were slightly too shiny, watches that were slightly too big. Sutton approached the 4 men first to refill their water. "Stupid American infrastructure," one of them laughed in heavy, accented English. "More bread, sweetie," another said, dismissing her with a wave of a hand thick with gold rings. Sutton nodded and turned to leave. As she turned her back, the language at the table shifted. It switched from broken English to a rapid-fire, low-frequency Russian dialect, a specific slang from the St. Petersburg underground. Most people in New York wouldn't have caught it. But Sutton wasn't most people. Her mother was Ukrainian, her father Polish. She had grown up in a house where Slavic languages were the secret code used to discuss money troubles and hidden pasts. "Is it done?" the man with the scar on his eyebrow asked in Russian. Sutton froze. She was only a foot away, hovering near the service station, pretending to polish a wine glass. "The kitchen is compromised," a second man replied, his voice a low growl. "The sous chef was expensive, but he delivered. The monkshood toxin is in the glaze, specifically on the duck." Sutton's blood ran cold. Monkshood. Aconite. It caused heart failure within minutes. It mimicked a heart attack. And the target? "The wolf sits alone," The man sneered, tilting his head toward Angelo Ford's back. He eats, he dies, the stock plummets, and by morning, we own the majority share. Sutton felt the room spin. The clatter of silverware sounded like gunshots. She looked over at Angelo Ford. He was rubbing his temples, completely unaware that the 4 men laughing behind him had just signed his death warrant. She looked toward the kitchen doors. A runner was coming out. He carried a silver tray. On it sat a plate covered by a silver cloche. Dome. The roast duck. Sutton's breath hitched. She had seconds. If she went to Gustav, he would call her crazy and fire her for eavesdropping on esteemed guests. If she called the police, Angelo would be dead before they arrived. The runner was Walford toward Angelo's table. Sutton didn't think. She didn't calculate. The survival instinct that had kept her alive in the foster system kicked in. She dropped the polishing cloth. She began to walk. Fast. The runner reached Angelo's table just as she did. The runner, a young guy named Leo, smiled professionally. "Mr. Ford, the chef's special, roast duck with a cherry glaze." Leo lifted the silver dome. The smell was intoxicating. Rich, savory, sweet. Angelo Ford picked up his fork. He looked indifferent. He stabbed a piece of the meat, swirling it in the dark, glossy sauce, the sauce that contained enough poison to kill a horse. "Mr. Ford!" Sutton's voice cracked. It was too loud. He paused, the fork halfway to his mouth. He looked up, his grey eyes narrowing in annoyance. Gustav was already rushing over from the host stand, his face purple with rage at the interruption. Sutton stammered. The 4 Russian men behind him had gone silent. She could feel their eyes boring into her back like laser sights. If she said poison out loud, they would kill her right here. They would shoot their way out. Angelo looked at her, his expression cold. "Yes?" Sutton stepped into the danger zone, right up to his table, invading his personal space. She reached out, her hand trembling violently, and placed her fingers over his wrist, stopping the fork. "This is not what you ordered," she whispered, her eyes pleading with him to understand. "I ordered the duck," Angelo said, his voice deep and confused. "No," Sutton said, her voice chauffored but firm. She leaned in, acting as if she were correcting a mistake, and switched to flawless Russian, loud enough for the table behind them to hear, but directed at Angelo. "Don't eat the glaze. The wolf walks into a trap." Angelo's eyes widened. Not because of the insolence, but because he understood Russian. A man in his position, dealing with global arms and international intelligence, spoke 4 languages. He froze. The silence at the table behind them was deafening. Angelo Ford slowly lowered the fork. He looked at the duck. Then he looked at Sutton. He saw the terror in her eyes. He saw the sweat on her brow. He saw the way she was angling her body to shield him from the table behind. "You're right," Angelo said, his voice shifting instantly from annoyed patron to commanding officer. He stood up, dropping the napkin on the plate, covering the food. "This isn't what I wanted." "Sutton!" Gustav hissed, arriving at the table. "What are you doing? Get away from Mr. Ford immediately." "Get her out of here," Angelo commanded Gustav, but his eyes were locked on Sutton's. "Fire her! Immediately! Throw her out the back exit!" Gustav looked stunned, but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Ford, I am so sorry. Sutton, let's go. Now!" Sutton felt a wave of nausea. He was firing her. She just saved his life. But as Gustav grabbed her arm to drag her away, Angelo leaned in close to her, his voice a whisper that only she could hear. "Go to the alley. Wait for the black SUV. Do not go home." Then, louder, for the benefit of the Russian assassins. "And don't let me see your face in this city again." Sutton was dragged toward the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked back one last time. Angelo Ford was standing his ground, turning slowly to face the 4 men behind him, a dark, predatory smile playing on his lips. The wolf knew he was being hunted, and now the hunters were trapped in the cage with him. Gustav threw the heavy metal door open, the cool night air of the back alley hitting Sutton like a slap in the face. The smell of wet pavement and old garbage replaced the scent of truffles. "You are finished in this town," Gustav screamed, ripping the apron off her. "Do you know who that was? Do you know how hard I worked to get Mr. Ford as a regular? You little—" "Gustav, shut up!" Sutton shouted back, surprising herself. "Just leave me alone." Gustav huffed, straightened his jacket, and slammed the door, lockforded it from the inside. Sutton was alone in the dark. Her hands were chauffeured so hard she couldn't clasp them together. She backed away from the door, scanning the alley. "Do not go home." That's what Angelo had said. Why? Because the Russians had seen her face. They heard her speak their dialect. They knew she was the leak. A crash echoed from inside the restaurant. The sound of breakered glass. Then a muffled pop. Sutton gasped. That wasn't a champagne cork. That was a suppressed gunshot. She turned to run, but the headlights blinded her. A sleek, armored Audi Q8 screeched into the alley entrance, blocked her path. The tires smoked as it halted inches from her legs. The back door flew open. "Get in!" It wasn't a driver. It was Angelo Ford himself, leaning out of the back seat. His tie was undone, and there was a smear of blood on his white collar. Not his own. Sutton didn't hesitate. She dove into the leather interior. Angelo yanked her in and slammed the door. "Drive!" he shouted to the partition. The car launched forward, pinning Sutton against the seat. They tore out of the alley onto the side street, clipping a garbage can and sending it flying. Did you kill them?" Sutton asked, her voice small. Angelo looked at her. He was checked a Glock pistol, ejecting the magazine and sliding it back in with a practiced click. "My security team intercepted them, but they have backup. We have to move." He looked at her then, really looked at her, under the passing streetlights. "What is your name?" "Sutton. Sutton James." "Well, Sutton James," Angelo said, reaching into the mini-fridge and pulling out a bottle of water, handing it to her. "You have a very specific set of linguistic skills for a waitress at the Obsidian Room." "My father was a translator," she lied, or half-lied. "I pick things up." "You picked up a dialect used exclusively by the Vori V Zakone, the Russian thief-in-law caste," Angelo said dryly. "And you identified a monk's hood poisoning attempt before I took a bite. Who are you, really?" "I'm a student," Sutton cried out, the adrenaline finally crashing into hysteria. "I have an exam on Thursday. I just needed tips. I don't know who those men were. I just heard them say you were going to die." Angelo studied her face. He was loofed for deceit, for a wire, for anything that suggested she was a plant. He saw only genuine, unadulterated terror. "Okay," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I believe you." "Can you drop me off at the subway?" Sutton asked, gripping the water bottle. "I just want to go home to my apartment in Queens." Angelo laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Sutton, those men back there, that was the inner circle of Viktor Volkov. They don't leave loose ends. If I drop you at the subway, you'll be dead before you reach the turnstile. They will burn your apartment down just to make sure you're inside it." Sutton went pale. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you're compromised," Angelo said, loofed out the window as the car sped onto the FDR drive, weaving through traffic at 100 miles an hour. "You saved my life. Now, I have to save yours. You're coming with me." "To where?" To the only place in New York where Volkov can't reach you. Angelo pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "Initiate Protocol 7, he said into the phone. "My penthouse, lockdown mode, and get me the dossier on the kitchen staff at the Obsidian Room. I want to know who paid the chef." He hung up and looked at Sutton. "Welcome to my world, Sutton. Try not to touch anything. And whatever you do, don't look out the back window." Sutton couldn't help it. She turned her head. 3 black SUVs were weaving through traffic behind them, ignoring lanes, ignoring lights. "They're following us," she whispered. Angelo didn't look back. He just tapped the partition to his driver. "Lose them, Jericho. Use the countermeasures." The driver, a silent mountain of a man, pressed a button on the dashboard. Sutton watched in horror and fascination as the rear bumper of the Audi dropped open. A cloud of thick, dense white smoke billowed out, covering the highway behind them in an impenetrable fog. Tires screeched behind them, followed by the sickening crunch of metal on metal as the chase cars collided in the blindness. Angelo sat back, closing his eyes. "That should buy us 10 minutes. Sutton stared at him. This wasn't a billionaire. This was a warlord in a suit, and she was trapped in the back seat with him. "Mr. Ford," she said softly, "why do they want you dead?" Angelo opened one eye. It was cold, like grey steel. "Because, Sutton, I bought something yesterday. Something that belongs to Russia. And they want it back before I can unlock it." "What is it?" Angelo reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, unassuming silver flash drive. "Evidence," he said. "Proof that Viktor Volkov isn't just a mobster. He's funding a coup. And you and I are the only 2 people in New York who know it." The car swerved sharply, exiting the highway and plunging into the dark streets of Lower Manhattan. The game had begun. The Audi Q8 slid into the underground parford structure of the spire, a residential monolith of glass and steel that pierced the Manhattan clouds. This wasn't just an apartment building, it was a fortress disguised as luxury. "Jericho, stay with the car. Keep the engine running but kill the lights," Angelo ordered, as the vehicle came to a halt in a private bay enclosed by reinforced concrete walls. "If anyone comes down that ramp who isn't me, put them down." "Understood, sir," Jericho rumbled, his eyes scanning the shadows. Angelo grabbed Sutton's wrist, his grip firm but not painful, pulling her toward a nondescript steel door. He placed his palm against a scanner. A red laser swept over his hand, then his retina. The door hissed open. "Move!" he commanded. They stepped into a private elevator. There were no buttons. The moment the doors closed, the carriage shot upward with stomach-churning speed. My ears popped, Sutton whispered, rubbing the side of her head. She was still clutching the water bottle Angelo had given her like a lifeline. "How high up are we going?" "Floor 90, Angelo said, adjusting his cuffs. He looked composed again, the panic of the car chase locked away behind a mask of indifference. "The entire floor is mine. Bulletproof glass, independent air filtration, and a direct line to the FBI director. You're safe here." The elevator doors opened directly into a living room that was bigger than Sutton's entire childhood home. It was stark, modern, and freezing. The walls were floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of a city that wanted them dead. The furniture was white leather and chrome. There were no photos, no plants, no signs of life. "Sit," Angelo pointed to a long white sofa. "I need to make a call." Sutton sat on the edge of the couch. She felt dirty in her waitress uniform, smelling of the alleyway and fear, sitting on leather that probably cost $10,000. Angelo walked to a massive mahogany desk near the window. He picked up a secure landline. "Grant, it's me," Angelo said, his back to Sutton. The exchange went south, Volkov knows. No, the drive is safe. Yes, I have a civilian with me. Collateral. We need an extraction team at the tower. 0600 hours. Good. He hung up and turned to Sutton. He walked over to a wet bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed one to her. Brandy, drink it. It stops the Shah-Ford. Sutton took the glass. Who is Grant? Grant is my chief of operations. He's the only man I trust with my life. He's arranging a chopper to pick us up from the roof at dawn. We just have to wait out the night. Angelo sat in the armchair opposite her, loosening his tie. For a second, the Billionaire facade cracked. He looked tired. He looked human. "Why did you learn Russian, Sutton?" he asked quietly. Sutton stared into the amber liquid. "My grandmother. She raised me after my parents died. She was from Odessa. She didn't trust American news, didn't trust American banks. She taught me that language was the only secret code that couldn't be hacked." Angelo nodded slowly. She was a wise woman. Secrets are the only currency that matters. "The men at the restaurant," Sutton said, her voice trembling. "They said, 'The Wolf.' Is that you?" "It's what the Russians call me, because I hunt alone." Angelo took a sip of his drink. "I developed a guidance chip for ballistic missiles. It makes them undetectable by radar. I was supposed to sell it to the US government next week. Volkov wants it. He tried to buy it. I refused. So he decided to take it from my corpse." Sutton shivered. "And the flash drive? Contains the blueprints. If Volkov gets it, he sells it to the highest bidder on the black market. And suddenly, no city on earth is safe." Suddenly, the lights in the penthouse flickered. Angelo froze. He set his glass down without a sound. "That shouldn't happen," he whispered. "This building is on an independent grid." The lights flickered again, then died completely. The penthouse plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the glow of the city outside. "Stay down," Angelo hissed. He moved with the speed of a predator, crouching low, moving toward his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a second handgun. Click. The sound of the electronic lock on the elevator disengaging echoed through the silent room. "They're here," Angelo said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They hacked the building's security." "How?" Sutton gasped, sliding off the couch to hide behind it. "Money," Angelo muttered. "Money opens every door." The elevator doors didn't open. Instead, a shattering crash came from the balcony. Sutton screamed as a figure in black tactical gear swung through the shattered tempered glass, rappelling from the roof. "Get back!" Angelo roared. He raised his weapon and fired. 2 shots. Pop! Pop! The figure on the balcony jerked backward and fell over the railing, disappearing into the night. But he wasn't alone. 2 more figures swung in, landing on the carpet with heavy thuds. They raised submachine guns. Angelo dove behind the marble kitchen island as bullets chewed up the white leather sofa where Sutton had been sitting seconds ago. "Sutton, the panic room! The bookshelf!" Angelo shouted over the gunfire. Sutton scrambled on her hands and knees. She saw the bookshelf Angelo was pointing to. She crawled, glass shards cutting into her palms. Bullets whizzed above her head, shattering the expensive vases and artwork. Angelo popped up, firing with precision. He took one attacker down with a shot to the leg, then the chest. But the third man was advancing, suppressing Angelo with a hail of automatic fire. Sutton reached the bookshelf. She saw a keypad hidden behind a fake book spine. "Code!" she screamed. "What's the code?" 1982, Angelo yelled, reloading his magazine. Sutton punched it in. The bookshelf groaned and swung inward, revealing a steel-walled chamber. "Get in!" Angelo sprinted across the open space, sliding across the polished floor as bullets sparked behind his heels. He rolled into the panic room, grabbed Sutton, and pulled her deeper inside. He slammed a red button on the wall. The bookshelf slammed shut, and the heavy steel bolts locked into place with a deafening thud. Silence. They were in a 10x10 steel box. Monitors on the wall showed the living room via hidden cameras. 5 more men in black gear were swarming the apartment. They were checkfoed the bodies. They were setting up explosives on the panic room door. "We're trapped," Sutton whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They're going to blow the door." "No," Angelo said, his chest heaving. He walked to a metal cabinet and pulled out a tactical vest. He threw it at her. "Put this on. That door can withstand C4, but they won't try to blow it. They know the structure creates a vacuum." He pointed to the monitor. One of the Russians was pulling a canister out of a bag. He was attaching a hose to the ventilation intake of the panic room. "Gas," Angelo said grimly. "They're going to smoke us out." Sutton looked at him, terror seizing her lungs. "So we die here?" "No. We leave the way I built for this exact scenario." Angelo moved to the back corner of the room. He pulled up a rug, revealing a trap door. "This leads to the maintenance shaft. It drops us 20 floors down to the laundry chutes." He lifted the heavy iron grate. A dark, dusty hole stared back at them. "Sutton," Angelo said, grabbing her shoulders. "I need you to be brave. Can you do that?" Sutton looked at the monitors. The Russians were turning the valve on the gas canister. She looked at Angelo. He wasn't loofah'd at her like a waitress anymore. He was loofah'd at her like a partner. "Yes," she said. "Good. Ladies first." The descent was a nightmare of claustrophobia and grease. They slid down maintenance ladders, crawled through ducts that smelled of lint and old copper, and finally tumbled out into a laundry collection room on the 70th floor. Angelo didn't stop. He led her to the service elevator, bypassing the electronic controls and hot-wiring the panel with a pocket knife he produced from his shoe. "We can't use the main lobby," Angelo explained as the elevator rattled downward. "They'll have snipers on the street. We're going to the basement. There's a subway tunnel access that hasn't been used since the 40s. "Where are we going?" Sutton asked, wiping soot from her face. Her uniform was torn, her knees were bleeding, and she had never felt more alive. "Teterboro Airport," Angelo said. "Grant has a private hangar there. If we can get to the jet, we can get to DC. Once I'm in FBI custody, Volkov can't touch us." They exited the building through a rusted grate that led into the subway tunnels. For an hour, they walked in the dark, stepping over rats and debris, guided only by the flashlight on Angelo's phone. Angelo was limping. "You're hurt," Sutton said, stopping him. "I'm fine," Angelo snapped. "You're bleeding," Sutton pointed to his leg. A bullet had grazed his thigh. The dark suit hid the blood, but his gait gave it away. Sutton knelt down. She tore a strip from her apron, which she still had tied around her waist, and wrapped it tightly around his leg. "Tighten it," Angelo grunted through gritted teeth. "Good, you've done this before." "My brother broke his leg skateboarding once. I had to make a splint." Sutton tied the knot. She looked up at him. In the harsh light of the flashlight, their faces were inches apart. Angelo looked at her. For a moment, the urgency of the chase faded. He reached out, his thumb brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I dragged you into hell." "You saved me from the alley," Sutton replied, her heart beating a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with the running. "We're even." Angelo's eyes lingered on her lips for a second too long. Then he cleared his throat and stood up. "Come on. The exit is a mile up." 3 hours later, they were in a stolen taxi. Angelo had hot-wired an old sedan left unlocked at a repair shop, speeding towards New Jersey. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Teterboro Airport was quiet. "Hangar 4, Angelo said, steering the car through the chain-link gates, having punched in a code. The hangar was massive, smelling of jet fuel. Inside, a sleek Gulfstream jet waited, its engines whining softly, ready for takeoff. Standing by the stairs of the jet was a man. He was tall, blonde, with a smile that looked like it belonged on a movie poster. He wore a camel coat and held a tablet. "Grant!" Angelo called out, stopping the car and getting out. He limped toward the plane, helping Sutton out of the passenger side. "Angelo!" Grant jogged over, his face full of relief. "My God, I thought you were dead. The news is saying there was a gas explosion at the spire." "Cover story," Angelo grimaced, leaning on Sutton for support. "Volkov's men. They breached the penthouse." "And the girl?" Grant looked at Sutton. His eyes were cold, assessing. "Who is she?" "She's with me," Angelo said firmly. "She's the reason I'm alive. Is the pilot ready?" "Ready and waiting," Grant nodded. "Get on board. I have a medical kit inside." Angelo sighed in relief. He took a step toward the stairs, but Sutton didn't move. She stood frozen, staring at Grant. "Sutton?" Angelo pulled at her arm. "Come on." Sutton's eyes were locked on Grant's shoes. They were expensive Italian loafers, but on the heel of the right shoe there was a smear of reddish clay. And then she heard it. A faint sound coming from inside the hangar office. A cough, but it wasn't just a cough. It was followed by a whisper. "Wait for the signal." It was Russian. Sutton yanked Angelo's arm violently. "Angelo, stop!" Angelo stumbled. "What? Don't get on the plane!" Sutton screamed. She looked at Grant. "He's lying." Grant's smile vanished instantly. His hand moved to his coat pocket. "Sutton, what are you tall-forward about?" "Grant is my best friend," Angelo said, confused. "He's not your friend," Sutton shouted, pointing at the office. "There are men in there. I heard them. And his shoes. That clay. That's from the construction site next to the obsidian room. He was there. He was watching you." Angelo looked at Grant. He looked at the shoes. He looked at the office. Grant sighed. He pulled a suppressed pistol from his coat. "Smart girl," Grant said, his voice smooth and devoid of regret. "Too smart for her own good." "Grant?" Angelo's voice broke. The betrayal hit him harder than the bullet. "Why?" "Volkov offered me something you never could, Angelo." Grant shrugged, leveling the gun at Angelo's chest. "Ownership. You were always going to be the Ford. I was tired of being the knight. Now give me the drive, and I'll make it quick." From the shadows of the hangar office, 4 men emerged. They were the same men from the restaurant, the ones Sutton had served the night before. They had walked right into a trap. "I trusted you," Angelo snarled, his hand inching toward his lower back where his gun was tucked. "Don't try it," Grant warned. "You're injured. You're slow. Hand over the drive." Angelo looked at Sutton. He looked at the jet that was supposed to be their salvation. "Run," Angelo whispered to her. "What?" Sutton breathed. "When I move, you run," Angelo said, his eyes locked onto Grant's. "I'm not leaving you," Sutton said, her voice chauffeured but stubborn. "How touching," Grant sneered. "Kill them both." Angelo didn't wait. He didn't reach for his gun. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the flash drive. "You want it?" Angelo yelled. "Fetch!" He threw the silver drive high into the air, over the heads of the Russians, towards a pile of oil drums in the corner. Every eye in the room, Grant's, the Russians', instinctively followed the arc of the metal drive. In that split second of distraction, Angelo tackled Sutton. Down! They hit the concrete floor behind the landing gear of the jet, just as Grant opened fire. Bullets sparked off the metal wheel struts. "You threw it away!" Sutton screamed over the noise of the gunfire. "It was a decoy," Angelo yelled back, pulling his gun. "The real drive is in my shoe. We have to move, under the belly of the plane." They scrambled beneath the fuselage of the roaring jet. Grant was shouting orders in English. The Russians were shouting in their native tongue. "Cut them off at the wing," one Russian shouted. Sutton grabbed Angelo's jacket. "Left! They're going left!" she translated instantly. Angelo nodded, understanding. Instead of going left, he dragged her right, towards the cargo bay doors. "Can you fly a plane?" Sutton asked hysterically. "No." Angelo gritted his teeth, firing 2 shots at a shadow approaching their flank. "But I can blow one up." He aimed his gun at the fuel line, connected to the tanker truck parked next to the jet. "Cover your ears!" Angelo fired. The bullet struck the valve. Jet fuel sprayed out under high pressure. He fired again. A spark. Whoosh! A wall of fire erupted between them and Grant's men. The heat was instantaneous and searing. The Russians scrambled back, shouting in panic, "Go, go, go!" Angelo pushed Sutton toward the rear exit of the hangar. They burst out into the cool morning air, the fire alarm blaring behind them. Smoke began to pour from the hangar. "They'll be disoriented," Angelo gasped, leaning heavily on Sutton. "But not for long. We need a car." They ran toward the Parford lot. But before they could reach a vehicle, a black van screeched around the corner, cutting them off. The side door slid open. Sutton froze, expecting more Russians. But the man inside wasn't Russian. He was older, with silver hair and a stern face. He was holding an assault rifle. "Mr. Ford," the man shouted, "get in. Jericho sent us." Angelo sagged with relief. "It's the extraction team, the real extraction team." They dove into the van. As the door slid shut, Sutton looked back at the hangar. Grant was standing in the doorway, framed by flames, his face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. He raised his gun, but the van peeled away, leaving him in the dust. Sutton slumped against the seat, her energy finally gone. She looked at Angelo. He was bleeding through the bandage. He looked pale. "We made it," she whispered. Angelo shook his head slowly. He looked at the flash drive he had pulled from his shoe. "Grant knows where my safe houses are. He knows my codes. He knows everything." Angelo closed his hand around the drive. "There is nowhere left to hide, Sutton. We have to stop running." "So what do we do?" Angelo looked at her, his grey eyes hardening into cold steel. "We go to war. We take the fight to Volkov, and we take back my company." The van didn't head back to Manhattan. It drove north for 2 hours, deep into the forested hills of upstate New York. They turned off a main road onto an unmarked gravel path that wound through dense pines until they reached a clearing. There was no mansion here, no luxury bunker, just a derelict concrete structure that looked like an abandoned salt storage facility. "Site Omega," Angelo murmured, wincing as the van bounced over a pothole. His face was greyish-white, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving only the pain of his gunshot wound. "My father built this during the Cold War. It doesn't exist on any blueprint. Grant doesn't know it exists because I bought the land through a shell company that closed 20 years ago." Jericho and the other guard, a stoic woman named Maria, helped Angelo out of the van. They ushered them into the echoing concrete cavern. It was cold, smelling of damp earth, but inside a central fortified room, there were banks of computers, satellite uplinks, and a full medical bay. Maria was an army medic, Angelo grunted as he was laid onto a steel table. "She'll patch me up." Sutton stood in the corner, arms wrapped around herself. She watched as Maria cut away Angelo's expensive, blood-soaked suit trousers and began to clean the ugly furrow the bullet had dug into his thigh. Angelo barely made a sound, just gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. He was tough, tougher than any man she had ever met. but he was mortal. When the wound was stitched and bandaged, Angelo sat up, refusing pain medication. He needed a clear head. He motioned for Sutton to join him at a large metal table covered in monitors, showing global news feeds. "The news is reporting a terrorist attack at Teterboro," Angelo said, gesturing to a screen showing the burning hangar. "Volkov is controlling the narrative. He's painting me as an unstable arms dealer who blew up his own plane to avoid arrest." "What happens now?" Sutton asked. She felt numb. Yesterday her biggest worry was a linguistics midterm. Today she was a fugitive in a concrete bunker with a wounded billionaire. "Now we have nothing," Angelo said flatly. "Grant froze my assets the moment we escaped. My accounts are locked. My properties are under surveillance. We have the drive, but no way to use it, and nowhere to go." "You said we were going to war," Sutton reminded him. "We are, but we don't have an army. We only have one advantage." Angelo looked at her intensely. "We know what they want, and we know how they speak." He pulled up a digital map on the main screen. It showed the global shipping routes of Volkov's criminal empire. Viktor Volkov isn't just a thug. He's a businessman. He prides himself on being untouchable because he never gets his hands dirty. Grant is his proxy here. If we want to hurt Volkov, we have to destroy Grant. How? Grant knows all your moves. He knows my defensive moves. He doesn't know how I attack. Angelo leaned forward, his eyes burning. "We're going to sell the drive." Sutton stared at him. "What? After all this, you're just going to give it to them?" "No, we're going to pretend to sell it. Not to Volkov, to his biggest rival." Angelo typed a name onto the screen. The Red Syndicate, a Chinese organized crime ring that had been trying to break into Volkov's European territory for years. "The Voryvy Zakone, Volkov's people, they have tremendous pride," Sutton murmured, her mind worfed. "They view territory as sacred. If they think someone else is moving in on their prize—" "Exactly," Angelo nodded, impressed. "Volkov would burn New York to the ground before he let the syndicate get my guidance chip technology. His ego is his weakness." "So what's the plan?" Angelo looked at Sutton. For the first time since the restaurant, he looked hesitant. "The plan requires a broker. Someone neutral. Someone who can call Volkov's people and convince them that the drive is on the open market and about to be sold to China." Sutton realized what he was, Asford. "You want me to make the call?" "I can't do it. They know my voice. Jericho sounds like a Marine, not an underground broker. It has to be you." Angelo's voice was rough. "You have to use that dialect you heard. You have to sound like you belong in their world. If you slip up, even for a second, they'll know it's a trap. And they will come for us with everything they have." The weight of it settled on her shoulders. This wasn't just translating a menu anymore. This was performing on the world's most dangerous stage without a script. "Why should I do it?" Sutton asked quietly. "Why shouldn't I just walk out that door and take my chances with the FBI?" Angelo stood up, limping slightly, and walked around the table to stand in front of her. The space between them felt charged, electric. "Because you're angry, Sutton. I saw your face when Grant betrayed us. You're not a victim. You're a fighter. They took your life away back in that restaurant. The only way to get it back is to take theirs." He was right. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a cold anger was solidifying. They had hunted her like an animal. Sutton looked him in the eye. "Tell me what to say." The bunker hummed with tension. Jericho was cleaning weapons at a side table. The rhythmic clack-clack of metal parts, the only sound besides the whirring of computer fans. Angelo sat next to Sutton, sliding a burner phone across the metal table toward her. It was connected to a complex voice modulator and routed through servers in 3 different countries to mask their location. "The number is for Anatoly," Angelo said softly. "He's Volkov's eyes and ears in the US now that Grant has been burned as an asset. He's old school, cruel, suspicious, and hates incompetence." Sutton stared at the phone. Her hands were clammy. She had spent the last hour rehearsing phrases with Angelo, practicing the harsh consonants and specific slang of the St. Petersburg underground, the language of the men who had planned Angelo's murder over roast duck. "Remember your cover," Angelo whispered, his hand briefly covering hers on the table. His skin was warm. "You are Elena. You are a freelance broker out of Prague. You don't care about their politics. You only care about money. You are arrogant because you hold the cards. Do not let him intimidate you." Sutton took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and envisioned the persona. Cold. Mercenary. Una. She opened her eyes and nodded. She dialed. It rang 3 times before a gruff, suspicious voice answered in Russian. "Who is this?" "This line is for emergencies only." Sutton spoke. Her voice dropped an octave, hardening into something unrecognizable. The Russian flowed out of her, thick with the specific street thug dialect she had heard at the Obsidian Room. "Listen to me, you Kremlin rat. I don't have time for your posturing. I have merchandise that belongs to your wolf." Silence on the other end. Then, a deeper, more dangerous tone. "Who are you?" "Call me Elena. The wolf dropped his toy at the airport. I picked it up. The guidance chip protocols. Very clever stuff. You have the drive?" Anatoly's voice was strained now. "I do. But I also have an offer from the Red Syndicate in Shanghai. They are offering 50 million, cash, delivered in Hong Kong by midnight." Angelo gave her a thumbs up, his eyes intense. "You cannot sell to them," Anatoly snarled. "That is our territory. That tech is ours." Sutton laughed, a harsh, abrasive sound that hurt her throat. "Yours? You couldn't even kill one American businessman in a restaurant. You are sloppy, Anatoly. The syndicate is professional. I prefer professionals." She was baiting a tiger with a stick. She could hear Anatoly breathing heavily on the other end. 60 million, Anatoly grated out. "We will pay 60. Today." 70, Sutton countered instantly. "And I don't deal with errand boys. I want the traitor. The American Grant. He brings the money. I bring the drive. Grant is busy. Then the Chinese get the drive. Goodbye." "Wait," Anatoly yelled. "Fine. Grant will do the exchange." "Where?" Sutton looked at Angelo. He pointed to a map on the screen. A location they had chosen specifically. Public. Chaos. A place where a sniper couldn't get a clean shot and where Grant couldn't easily use heavy backup. Times Square. The red stairs over the TKTS booth. 1 hour. If I see anyone other than Grant, I smash the drive and send the pieces to Shanghai just to spite you." She hung up before he could argue. Sutton slumped back in her chair, exhaling a shaky breath. "Did he buy it?" "He bought it," Angelo said, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. His pride wouldn't let him believe a random woman could outsmart them. "He thinks you're just greedy. They'll send Grant." "So we go to Times Square?" Sutton asked. "No. Jericho and Maria go to Times Square. They'll be watching. When Grant shows up with the money, they take him down. Publicly. With so many witnesses and cameras, he can't just disappear. The FBI will have to get involved, and once Grant is in custody, his immunity deal with Volkov falls apart. He'll talk to save himself." It seemed too simple, too clean. A phone rang. Not the burner phone, Angelo's personal, encrypted satellite phone that only 3 people in the world had the number for. Angelo frowned. He picked it up. "This line is dead. How did you—" He stopped. His face went rigid, all color drained from his skin. He listened for a full minute, his eyes wide, staring at nothing. "If you touch her, if you harm one hair on her head," Angelo whispered, his voice trembling with a rage Sutton had never heard before. He slowly lowered the phone. He looked at Sutton, and there was devastation in his eyes. "It was Grant," Angelo said hollowly. "What? How did he find this number?" "He didn't just find the number. He found my Achilles heel." Angelo stood up, pacing wildly, running a hand through his hair. "He knows it's a trap, Sutton. He's not going to Times Square." "What did he say?" Angelo stopped pacing and looked at her. He looked utterly defeated. "He said he has my sister." Sutton was confused. "You said you were alone. You never mentioned a sister." "Her name is Clara. She's 19. She's in college in Boston. I've kept her hidden my whole career to protect her from this life. Grant is the only person who knew where she was." Angelo grabbed his jacket, ignoring the pain in his leg. He began loading a fresh magazine into his handgun with chauffeured hands. "He has her. He sent me a photo. He's holding her at the Staten Island shipyards. He says if I don't bring the drive to him, alone, in the next 90 minutes, he'll kill her." The trap had sprung shut, but they weren't the ones holding the rope. "Jericho Maria, gear up. We're going to Staten Island," Angelo commanded. "He said come alone," Sutton said, terrified by the look in his eyes. "I know what he said," Angelo growled, chambering around. "But I'm done playing by their rules. If Grant wants a war, I'm going to bring him an apocalypse." He looked at Sutton. "You stay here. It's too dangerous." "No," Sutton said, standing up. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold resolve. She grabbed a spare Kevlar vest from the rack. "I'm the one who baited him. I'm the reason he changed the plan. I'm finishing this." Angelo hesitated, then nodded once. "Stay close to me, and don't hesitate." They headed out into the cold night toward a confrontation that only one side would survive. The Staten Island shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal shrouded in heavy fog. Angelo parked the black van behind a wall of shipping containers, his face a mark of cold fury. He checked his watch. "Jericho Maria, take the perimeter. Silence is key. If they hear a shot before I make contact, Clara dies." He turned to Sutton. She looked small in the oversized Kevlar vest, but her hands were steady on the steering wheel. "Sutton," Angelo said, his voice dropping, "when the shooting starts, I need you to ram the south wall of the warehouse. It's corrugated iron. You'll go right through. You are our extraction. If you fail, we all die." "I won't fail," she promised. Angelo squeezed her hand once, then vanished into the mist. Inside Warehouse 4, the air was stagnant. In the center, under a single harsh floodlight, sat Clara. She was 19, terrified, and gagged. Standing behind her was Grant, pressing a pistol to her temple. "Tick-tock, Angelo," Grant's voice echoed through the vast space. "I can smell the desperation." Angelo stepped out from the shadows, hands raised, the silver flash drive in his palm. "Let her go, Grant. Take the tech. Leave the girl." "Volkov is sentimental," Grant sneered, tightening his grip on Clara. "He wants the tech, but he also wants the man who refused him to suffer. Toss the drive. Now, or I paint the floor with her." Angelo locked eyes with his sister, trying to convey a silent message. "Be ready." He tossed the drive. It skittered across the concrete, stopping at Grant's feet. "Good choice," Grant smirked, his eyes shifting downward. That split second of greed was his mistake. Angelo reached into his pocket and clicked a remote detonator. The drive, actually a magnesium flare casing, erupted in a blinding flash of white light and a deafening bang. Grant screamed, blinded, firing wildly into the air. "Now!" Angelo roared. From the rafters, 2 suppressed shots rang out. Phut-phut. Grant's snipers fell from the catwalks before they could pull their triggers. Angelo sprinted forward, tackling Grant just as the warehouse wall exploded inward. Crash! The black van smashed through the metal siding like a battering ram. Sutton slammed on the brakes, spinning the vehicle to create a steel shield between Clara and the rear doors where Russian gunmen were pouring in. "Get in!" Sutton screamed, leaping out. She slashed Clara's bonds with a knife. "Run to the van! Hide under the seats!" Sutton turned back. The fight wasn't over. Grant had recovered. He had Angelo pinned to the concrete, a knife inching closer to Angelo's throat. Angelo was losing blood from his leg wound, his strength failing against the younger man. "Die, you arrogant!" Grant grunted, pushing the blade down. Sutton saw a discarded steel pipe on the floor. She didn't think. She reacted. She grabbed it and swung with everything she had. Thwack! The pipe connected with the back of Grant's knee. A sickening crunch echoed. Grant howled, buckling sideways. Angelo used the opening to buck his hips, throwing Grant off. He scrambled up, snatched Grant's fallen gun, and leveled it. Grant looked up, blood streaming from his nose, but still smiling a broken, bloody grin. "You can't do it, Angelo. You're a businessman. You're not a murderer." Angelo stood over him, chest heaving. Around them, Jericho and Maria were laying down, suppressing fire against the advancing Russians. "I resigned this morning," Angelo said coldly. Bang! Grant slumped back. The traitor was gone. "Angelo! We have to move!" Sutton screamed, dragging him towards the van. 6 more gunmen were closing in, bullets sparfed off the concrete inches from their feet. They dove into the open side door, just as Jericho slammed on the gas. The van peeled out of the warehouse, tires screaming, leaving the carnage and the burning flare behind. As they hit the main road, putting distance between them and the shipyard, Angelo slumped against the wall of the van. He reached out, gripping Clara's hand tightly, ensuring she was real. Then he looked at Sutton. He was battered, bloody, and exhausted, but he was smiling. "You have a hell of a swing, Sutton James," he whispered. "I hate rude customers." Sutton managed a weak laugh, tearing a strip from her dress to bind his arm. Angelo closed his eyes, finally letting his guard down. "Jericho, get us to the safe zone and call the FBI. I have a story to tell them." 3 months later, Manhattan was crisp and golden with autumn leaves. Sutton walked into the obsidian room. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She wore a tailored silk dress, her head held high. She sat at the table by the window. "Table 4. "Water?" a nervous waiter asked. "Champagne," a voice interrupted. Angelo Ford stood there. He looked younger, the weight of the world lifted from his shoulders. Ford Interglobal had been dissolved, its assets liquidated to veterans' charities. Volkov and his network were dismantling in a black site prison. Angelo sat opposite her, placing a small velvet box on the table. "I don't need charity, Angelo," Sutton smiled. "I'm finishing my linguistics degree." "It's not charity," Angelo said. "It's a retainer. I'm starting a new firm, private cybersecurity. I need a partner who can handle high-pressure negotiations, speaks fluent Russian slang, and doesn't flinch when things explode." He opened the box. It wasn't a ring. It was a key to a corner office on the 40th floor. "So, Sutton James," Angelo grinned, challenging her. "Are you ready to get back to work?" Sutton picked up the key, feeling the cool metal against her skin. She looked out the window at the city she had once feared. Now, a city she owned. "Don't swallow the champagne, Angelo," she teased, raising her glass. "It might be poisoned." They clinked glasses, the sound ringing clear and bright, marford the end of the chase and the beginning of everything else. Thanks for watching. If Sutton and Angelo's escape had your heart racing, smash that like button. Comment below. Would you have gotten on the plane with Grant, or did you suspect him from the start? I want to hear your theories. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We release new, real-life, inspired thrillers every week that you won't want to miss. See you in the next video.